there are moments in your life when you feel that you are on the edge of something, like you have the option to take it up another level. Like it's up to you. Like if you really wanted to, you can go after the thing or you can pull back. If you hear something bad's happened, even the progressive people will sometimes say, then why was she out? We live in a very imperfect world and it's a deeply patriarchal society. It's not at all a perfect system where you try to burden and punish the vulnerable instead of empowering them.
Welcome to episode 2 of Fearless Fresh Blood. In this episode, you will meet a fearless New York City based filmmaker who is such a beautiful soul. She will teach us that if we have a dream, we should go for it and build a community of people who share similar dreams. She shares her experience writing and making films as a form of healing from different types of cultural and societal induced traumas. She also shares with us that as a community, we need to grow together and just do better when we are raising our women. As a community, we need to empower and support our women instead of enforcing restrictions on them. I hope you really enjoy this episode. And just as a disclaimer, this episode includes sensitive topics and harsh realities. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Fearless Chapter 1. On today's episode, I would like to introduce you all to Richa Rudola. She is a New York City filmmaker, and how we connected is sort of strange because I did a bunch of Googling for this podcast as research, and that is how I found Richa, and I found her webpage, her portfolio of all her films. And so I reached out to her, and she diplomatically accepted. And that being said, I do want to share a little bit of Richa's portfolio before we go ahead and get started. So Richa, her short film Taza Khun, which is translated to Fresh Blood in English, screened at Nashville Film Festival, winning 8 awards across 28 film festivals, and is now available on Amazon Prime and Shorts TV India. Her latest short film, The Seal, won the 2019 Future of Film is Female grant and is currently enjoying a successful run on the film circuit. She has also directed and acted in short films and off-Broadway plays. She is currently developing a TV series about data science, astrology, and dreams. So welcome, Richa. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Kay. I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having me, and I really like the serendipitous way that we connected.
Yes. So tell us a little bit more about who you are and your little background and how you got into film.
Sure. I came into film very organically over the years. I grew up in India. Films were not a big part of my life then. And I came to the US for graduate school in 2005 to study statistics. And while I was going to grad school, there was a weekly movie club that I got invited to. And that's where, I mean, I think I went without having any agenda. I just thought it would be something cool and fun to do on the side, and I was very pleasantly surprised by my first meeting. And then I went to a few more. And I realized through that movie club experience that this is the first time I was actually seeing foreign language films properly and independent films. Because before then, I think not consciously, the films I'd been exposed to were mostly big budget Hollywood films or the, standard Bollywood films that I would be surrounded by. And I didn't watch that many films too. But having a chance to consume that kind of content just opened my eyes a little bit. And then I moved to New York a couple of years later for a job. And it turned out to be a blessing in disguise because New York is so great for independent films. So I frequented so many theaters, and I sometimes would just walk into a theater without having a plan. I would just watch whichever two films were playing, around dinner time. And I would sneak out and have like a kati roll for dinner and then sneak back in and watch more films. And it was just a great education for me, a very impromptu, unofficial education in film. And then just along the way, I realized I liked screenwriting because I enjoyed how films were written. So then I studied screenwriting, and making films was never actually a plan. It's just that once I started writing scripts, I was part of a lab and my mentor suggested, I should make that film. So, and then sort of a whole community chipped in to help me make it. That's how Taza Khoon came to be. So it was very, like, I'm very surprised myself that I am a filmmaker right now in my life and that I really found my calling in that. But it was not at all the plan, it just happened.
I love that. I love it just happened, you know. So how long have you been doing film?
I guess actively for 4 or 5 years, and by that I mean I've been part of communities. I've actively made content, and before that, before 5 years ago, I would say I was a shadow artist or a shadow filmmaker, where I knew I wanted to pursue it, but I was often working alone. Like I was dreaming alone, I was thinking of it alone, I was at it alone. Sometimes I wouldn't even talk about what my dream was out loud with loved ones and friends and things like that. I didn't say it out loud. And then when I started to, and then it became more real, and then I became part of these like film communities where then it felt like I was not trying alone anymore. I was kind of dreaming with other people who had similar dreams. And then we were all working on our own dreams or like working on each other's dreams, together. So I guess there's no clean answer, but I would say at a minimum 5 years, at a maximum 11 years.
Wow, that is a long time, and it also takes a long time to get in the whole hang of things and get your community and start talking to people about it and building each other up. And I think that's one of the most important things of building a community of like-minded people, right? And having those mentors and having the people around you to support you is super important, right?
Absolutely. And I think that in my case also, I was also trying something that felt new. And before I could even come to the community phase, so to speak, I had to kind of contend with myself. Like I had to make the decision for myself that is this something that I enjoy doing? Is this something that I want to keep learning?
What you mentioned there is it starts with you, right? And the dream starts with you and making that realization that it is your dream, right? Was there anything that was stopping you from even acknowledging it or even coming into the surface? What you said earlier, you said that, you kept it inside of you as a secret from your family members and your friends. Was there a reason behind that?
Yeah, gosh, I think lots of reasons, at least two, three reasons I can think of. One is that when you've not been on that type of path ever, it can feel very daunting to try to claim it, because then you worry that people are going to think that, who are you to try this? Why are you trying to be something you're not? Because maybe they've boxed you in a certain way, or they've put a label on yourself, or maybe you yourself have put that label. So I myself always thought I was a science, person, like maths and statistics. That was sort of my world. So the going from that to like films and screenwriting, it seems like a stretch. I mean, I would actually argue, now that I think about it, it's not a stretch, but at the time, especially if you have like self-doubt and you lack confidence, and then all kinds of negative thoughts will come to you. So this was certainly one that I thought that this seems completely out of pattern for me, and people will feel that too. And then secondly, also because I was on an H-1B visa at the time, until very recently, until like 2 3 years ago, I was on an H-1B visa. So when you have an employer sponsored visa, that is sort of the main reason you're able to stay in the country, and that's the sort of source of your life, your day-to-day life, then it's hard to take those kind of decisions lightly, right? You think long and hard about, so what does that mean? Am I now going to go on a student visa? Does that mean I have to quit my job? Uh, and basically it's like switching career tracks. And then what if, there's no future in that? What if I can't make money? What if this is just a stupid decision of pursuing a passion thing which doesn't lead to a job, and then I can't have legal status in the country, I have to move back. All kinds of, that was certainly one thing, like a legal visa reason was one other thing. And was there another one? Gosh, this is going to sound crazy, but I think I can explain it. There are moments in your life when you feel that you are on the edge of something, like you have the option to take it up another level. Like it's up to you. Like if you really wanted to, you can go after the thing, or you can pull back. I know what it's like to pull back. I know what it's like to walk the edge. It's a feeling you recognize. And then, and this is something that I wouldn't have talked about to anyone, but it was my personal thing. But I'm like, am I going to push forth or pull back again? So making that decision to go to New York Film Academy to study screenwriting was a big deal for me. It was a big decision. Even though it looks like nothing from the outside, for me personally, it was a big decision. So like, I guess these two, three reasons were what kept me from pursuing.
Yeah, of course. And I think what you just described, it's not crazy. It's fearlessness, right? It's like, pushing your boundaries and getting out of your comfort zone and just doing what you want to do. And I think that's what that drives it is passion, right? It's passion to just go for it. Now, thanks for telling us about the history of how you got into film. And it's really great to hear. And I'll ask you some questions about that later on, about what tips you would give to people who are still struggling with making a decision about their passion project or just going with their routine. But first, I want to talk about your most recent film that is in the film circuit, The Seal. So tell us a little bit more about the inspiration behind this film. And I don't want to spoil it for everybody. I want you to introduce it before I start speaking about it. So go ahead.
Sure. The Seal is it's a psychological thriller about a woman's journey of healing from trauma. I wanted to make a film that showed something that maybe we have seen before, but in a different way. I wanted to focus less on something traumatic that's happened to somebody, and instead how they dealt with it. And in the dealing with it is often the thing that's holding us back. And in this particular case, as is often the case with trauma, there can be a little bit of a battle between the mind and the body. One part of you remembers the traumatic thing that happened, and it kind of becomes imbibed in you, and the other part of you wants to forget. You'd rather forget about the painful thing that happened and just want to move on. So if these two forces are kind of, in battle with each other, but they're both within you, they're both parts of you, they're both aspects of you. How do they play out? How do they win? How do you basically ultimately move on as the individual who needs closure and needs healing? So these are the things I wanted to showcase, and that's why I always thought of it as a thriller, which is sort of a different maybe perspective on a story that's not extremely, you know, unique in that kind of story has been told before, but I wanted to tell it from this particular lens, and that was very important to me.
Sure. And why was that so important to you?
I mean, for me, a lot of the work that I've done, some of the themes that have come out in it, which are not planned, I mean, it just happens to come out in my work, is how women are treated, all over the world, but certainly in India, which is what I know. So I think as a writer, I write what I know, and then of course I dramatize it. So having grown up in India and spent a considerable amount of my life in the US, a lot of the characters I write also spend time in these two places, whether it's through forced immigration or, sort of immigration by choice, which is what's happened in the Seal. Um, but really, the thing that holds some of these narratives together is that a lot of these characters have been marginalized in some way, or they've gone through some kind of repressed trauma, and certainly I have in my life. So making films, actually I would say writing films, and then making them has been a way that I have dealt with it. So for me, it's essential. Like once I found this outlet, I knew that it worked for me on multiple levels. It also helped me heal. The Seal in particular is a type of story where, because it's about a character who's healing from trauma, I felt that in writing it and by making it with a really amazing team was such an affirmation for me and this story that I felt healed from within, even when I wrote multiple versions of the script, when we workshopped the script together and I heard people's feedback on it. when we were going through pre-production, and we got an amazing team on board, including Shahana Goswami, who plays the lead in The Seal. Just an amazing team of actors and like crew people. And then once we captured footage, from set, we had such a blast on set. This is such a difficult film, and yet we had a blast. We were laughing way too much while making this film. You would not believe. And then in the edit room, when you see the footage you've captured and it comes alive and you get to make the movie, and you layer on important elements like music score and sound design and color correction and all of these things. And to me, I swear to God, I felt little by little like a little bit healed in that process. So I guess I have a lot of skin invested in the film because it feels like a personal narrative journey for me. I also started to actually go through therapy while I was making that film, because I realized I'm sending my character off to therapy. I should probably try it too. I probably need it too. And I think actually a lot of us could benefit from therapy, but I certainly did. So, I mean, The Seal was very important to me, still is. And I cannot wait to release it into the world once the festival circuit is done, and hopefully share it with other people too.
And one of the things that you mentioned, you said that throughout this entire process, you found healing in it, right? So I want to stress on that point, right? Where you found this project, you started writing this film, and you built this film from scratch, right? With the entire production. And that entire production helped you heal from your own traumatic events. And I think that's so important, right? That healing process of just for you, it was healing through your artistic process, right? For me, it's healing through writing and journaling. But I think what others don't focus on is that you keep it when you keep it in your mind so much, it manifests in so many different ways throughout your community, throughout your life. And it's so important to heal from what your mind is going through. And so just put it in a project or put it in some type of artistic form and just heal that way. And I'm so proud that you've healed from that, and you found healing through therapy as well. I think there is the stigma, especially in the Indian community, about mental health care and taking care of it, and therapy in general. That being said, I do want to go over the protagonist, and one of the themes that came up when I was watching The Seal, and one of the themes from the protagonist was substance usage, right? And it was so prominent in the film that, Sheetal, who was the protagonist, was using substances to heal or try to cope from some kind of trauma. And at that point in the beginning, you don't know what she's going through, but you kind of know through behaviors. And would you say that as human beings, or as communities, do we tend to take substances and use it to cope from a lot of our traumas, with whether it's psychological or emotional and physical? And what are your thoughts on it, and how have you portrayed it in the film? And then just provide us with some opinions on thoughts on that.
I'm glad you picked up on that, because that was not really an intentional thing to show drug usage. It wasn't intentional. It came a little bit later in the script, but the genesis of that idea was that I wanted to show a character like Sheetal, which actually in Hindi the word means kind and gentle. I wanted to show a character is who has that name but is actually very unkind to herself. So she's in a way punishing herself physically, harming herself by living in this numbed state. So I wanted to show drug usage as a way to self-medicate the pain. And she's also some of the waxing and all of that, which is a way of internalizing some of the past trauma. I mean, I've already started to give away too much for people that ever want to watch the film, but the intention is really to show that contrast. That was always the objective. And then in order to procure the drugs, of course, and this really beautiful, like lovable character of the drug dealer came in, and she's also living in isolation, so to speak, but she's forced to interact with the dealer. So that was sort of the intention for that. But I think that substance abuse is just one of many ways that people cope. And I think awareness is the first step. Sheetal in the beginning doesn't have the awareness that she's running from her past, and the past, she really can't outrun the past. It comes knocking on her door. And what you were saying earlier about, I think everyone has a need to heal, but not everyone recognizes that. Not everyone is aware of that.
Right. And I really liked that dynamic as well. And I don't want to give away too much to to the viewers, but I do want them to watch the film. One of the things that you mentioned, and the way I summarize it is hurt people, right? And even if it's themselves, right? They hurt themselves. So, I mean, you said that you became more aware of your traumas in your 20s. So, if you had to go back, or say you're giving advice to your old teenage self right now, what would you say to your old teenage self?
I would just say, don't be so sure of yourself. I thought I knew a lot of things, and I was really quite dumb, you know. I mean, I still feel dumb, but I look back and I was like, yeah, you didn't know a lot. You thought you knew a lot. And the older I get, I really feel that I don't know that much. So, but I don't know if that's like, I mean, I feel like maybe when you're younger, your world is more insular. You're looking inward more. And that might be just being a young person thing. But for me, certainly, if I could go back and tell my teenage self something, especially when I was like 16, 17, 18, I would say, don't think your life is going to pan out this way. Be open to experiences, try new things. Don't think you're on like this one track, which I think at the time I myself thought that. That's why the shift to jumping towards filmmaking felt like a leap, you know? So I think that's what I would tell myself.
So, this is for all the younger people out there, and you're giving this advice for all the younger people. So, thank you for that. Well, it's all about the external forces and internal forces, right? When you're growing up in a certain culture, in a certain society that influences your thoughts and your behaviors. So, I mean, I do hope I'm more hopeful for the younger generation now than when I was growing up. But everybody has their own thoughts, and everybody has their own feelings about certain things, and also a lot of people have traumas, right? And a lot of women have traumas, and so when we're younger, we're not aware of these things. We just tend to just do instead of being more introspective. And I think that's the key in terms of like understand being open-minded in general, right? How do we be open-minded is understanding ourselves, and therefore we can understand the world around us. So let's talk about Taza Kun. I really truly enjoyed that film because it was so different. I watched The Seal first, and then I watched Taza Kun, and it was different, but it was also quite. I had to watch it 3 times to actually understand what was going on. It was pretty great. And I'm more of an analytical person, so I do want to go into detail about certain things. And so I want to ask you, what was the inspiration behind that film?
The inspiration behind writing it was an exercise I gave myself, a writing exercise where I wanted to explore what it would be like to be a brown vampire. Because I had just watched this really beautiful film by Jim Jarmusch called Only Lovers Left Alive. My best friend had played it for me, and it was so beautiful. I really loved it, and it made me think later on that every single vampire film I've ever seen, and I've only seen a handful, but like every single one of them has been about white vampires. And because, I think vampires are not that big of a deal in India, at least when I was growing up, like we cared about spirits more and ghosts, but like no one cares about vampires in India, at least then. But in the US, vampire stuff everywhere. And since I made Taza Khun, somebody told me that in the 80s there was some show about black vampires, which I didn't know about. So apparently there is that exists. But at the time that when I started to write Taza Khun, whatever exposure I had to vampires was just all white. So I was wondering, what if there was a brown vampire? And I just wanted to explore the day in the life of one. So I gave myself that writing exercise. And what emerged was this homeless type of dude, not living a glamorous lifestyle and hungry for fresh blood, and then the kind of fresh blood he finds is probably a little different from, I love titles. So for me, the title usually comes not first, but very early on. So I always knew, like, even with the seal, the title is an anagram, and with fresh blood, it meant more than one thing. So, the story just goes into it. So to me, it was see what happens with this brown vampire. And then everything else with the sex trafficked girl just revealed itself. That was not planned, it just came out in the writing.
Sure. And so one of the themes that I noticed in Thaza Kun was isolation, right? And so the sex trafficking, sure, I did see that, but it wasn't so prominent to me than just isolation on both sides, right? Which is what brought them together at the end. I think that, like earlier you said, your writing comes from things that you've experienced. So, was there a time in your life where you've experienced isolation, or, just tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. This film on the surface looks like it's about a vampire and somebody who gets sex trafficked. Obviously, I'm not a vampire and I've not been sex trafficked, but I have felt extremely isolated in my life, especially when I was in eighth standard. I was 12 years old. I was just so miserable that I just remember, like, I think if I had access to, a therapist and stuff back then, I'm sure they would have said I was borderline depressed. I just had a very difficult year. I was bullied and I guess I'm just a dramatic person, so maybe things were not as bad, but I just felt like they were horrendous and just remember being miserable. Don't ask me to explain why. I just remember I was so miserable that year and I felt very, very isolated. Didn't feel like I had any close friends. And there were a couple incidents that had happened in school as well that made me feel that, oh, I think that's right. I don't have any good friends. And, what friends I did have outside of school, sometimes I felt bullied by them. So it was just not a good. And, of course, when you're 12, your body's changing and everything is just terrible. So, yeah, I can think back to that time in my life.
Sure. And so now we have the first brown vampire, right, on television. So all of your isolation produced this first brown vampire. That's amazing.
Yay! That's a great way to put it. I love it. Thanks, Kay.
Yeah, of course, anytime. So I think that people will definitely find some kind of connection after watching Taza Kun. And that name, though, that is a really great name for a film, Fresh Blood. And it could be interpreted into just in so many different ways. Okay, so when people do watch The Seal and then they do watch Taza Kun, I know we did talk about some themes today, but what would you want them to walk away with?
I think I would just want them to feel the stories. Hopefully, they've stepped or feel like they've stepped into someone else's shoes that they did not have much exposure to or had come across. Similar to how I felt when I watched very different films from what I'd seen growing up. I did not see a lot of diversity growing up because, I mean, the Indian films I was watching in the 80s and 90s, and India is such a diverse country. But if you just watch like Bollywood stuff coming out of Mumbai, there isn't a ton of diversity in those. And I didn't get to watch as many films from the South, and the South alone has so much diversity there too, and such great films. But what I'm saying is that I got exposed to lots of diversity in different characters. For example, watching Pedro Almodovar's films, I was shocked to see these kind of characters who I had never come across in real life. And even if I hadn't come across, I saw a depiction of it that seemed so humane, and I felt like I understand a little bit about what that person's experience is probably like. Um, so even if people have not come across the kind of stories I've made films on, or they know about it, but it's a different perspective, I hope that they can just feel the emotions and just appreciate that even though this is dramatized, it is often a reality for millions of people. I would prefer if people watch the films in the reverse order, Fresh Blood, and then The Seal, just because hopefully they're also seeing my evolution as a filmmaker. Because I definitely have grown so much like I've also directed films that I haven't written, and even in making those, I've definitely felt my own growth as a filmmaker. So, personally for me, I would recommend that order. But listen, as long as you're interested in watching my films, I'm so grateful. So that's something that, yeah, I would really appreciate.
But Daza Kun is available right now, so they can watch it right now on Amazon Prime.
And yeah, for people in India that have Tata Sky, Shorts TV India has a subscription with them, so they can watch it that way too.
Great. That's great. I watched it on Amazon Prime and I told all my friends to watch it too.
Thank you.
So let's talk about your healing, right? So you mentioned that, you've gone through a lot of traumatic incidents yourself, and that you also mentioned that film and producing the film and writing the film and the whole production was part of your healing. So are there any other ways in which you find healing in, apart from filmmaking and film writing?
Yeah, and I wanted to offer sort of two ways of talking about this. For when it comes to healing, uh, yeah, writing has helped me actually more than making films, and part of it is because when you write about something, usually, there's it's coming from a place of truth, even though you are fictionalizing and adding certain dramatic elements to the story. For example, as you said with Taza Kun, sex trafficking vampire on the surface, but underneath isolation. I don't know about the surface level stuff. I know about the underlying stuff, right? So that is a great way to tap into those wounds, so to speak. And then every time you kind of go to it from a lovable angle, as opposed to the hurtful angle that you felt when the wounds happened, I think it just leads to a slightly healing experience. And again, I don't think I'm completely healed. I don't know if we ever fully heal, but it certainly is like a little bit of a balm at a time type of thing. But I think that another way of healing is just like I said, just like self-awareness. And like for me, therapy is something I started doing a couple years ago. And then it stopped for a while, then I resumed it, especially this year, where I feel like, as you said, with so many changes, many of which are out of our control, I think mental health has, there's more need now than ever before to take care of ourselves that way. So I've done that too. And just surrounding myself with positive people and not negative people that bring you down. Like that was also a choice that I made several years ago to only keep that kind of company. That is another way of healing, I think, because if you're always with people that pull you down, that feed off of negativity, you don't even realize it, but you're letting traumatic things happen to you over and over again. So that's sort of on the topic of healing. But I think that for me, filmmaking is not just about healing. Writing and making films is also about exploring myself. And there's other aspects of myself that I'm curious about, other aspects of other, people and things I've observed that I'm curious about. So I use writing primarily as a way to explore that. And I find that terribly exciting and fun. It never stops being fun for me, that part. And that's when, even when I'm writing about things that I know nothing about, in fact, that's when it becomes more fun, because then you try to find that truth, the truthful place, and yet if you're writing about something on the surface that you know nothing about, then how do you connect the dots? How do you do research? Like I'm working on a TV show where I'm writing about data science and neuroscience. I know very little about these things. I mean, I know a little bit about data science, but I know nothing about neuroscience. And it's so fun to explore and research and then still find the emotional heart of a story. So that sort of is why I continue to, I think, make films. It's both the healing part, but then also the curiosity part.
You touched on all of the different ways of your mental health being impacted, right, by all of these experiences. Do you think that there are other aspects of your health that have been impacted by these experiences?
Physical health, a little bit, just a loose way of saying it. Partly because when I was growing up, especially as a teenager, there also came a time where my parents wouldn't feel safe letting me out. Like that's also something that a lot of Indian parents do, where they put a lot of controls on their daughters and not enough on their sons. So there became this thing where, for example, when my parents would go out, let's say they're going for a dinner or something, they would actually lock the house from outside. And my brother and I would have everything we need inside the house, like food, TV, Maggie, Coke. We would like have fun having junk food when my parents were not here. But but some limitation on mobility, that certainly, is an impact. When I compare to my husband, for example, grew up in this country, and we had very different childhoods, I think. He grew up in a smaller town upstate, a lot more freedom, and I grew up in a big city where actually it seemed like a more dangerous place, and I had to be more careful as a girl, stuff. So I think a little bit of physical mobility and stuff was definitely impacted.
You mentioned as a girl a lot, right? Like living in a big city, and as a woman or as a girl, you need to be more careful. I know why that is. I grew up in India too, but I want you to tell the audience, why is it that you had to be more careful? Why was it that there were more restrictions on you than there were on your brother? I want you to tell that story to our audience.
I don't think it was just me. I know that a lot of my girlfriends also faced similar things. And yet I also know some girlfriends that didn't, and those were the lucky ones that I was always envious of, that they could go out to parties, they could stay out later, and I couldn't. At the time I was a teenager, I obviously thought it was unfair, and I would, argue with my parents and stuff. But I'm sure my parents' rationale was to keep, Delhi is, even back then, was the rape capital. Um, I want to say the world, but certainly India. And, when it becomes dark, and, we're not living in a gated community where you don't know who's coming in and out. So, um, I mean, if I was a parent, I understand that, wanting to keep your child safe. And it's not at all a perfect system where you try to burden and punish the vulnerable instead of empowering them and trying to control the strong, the perpetrator, so to speak. That's just not what happens in India, or at least didn't when I was growing up. And I would love to see that dialogue change. um, Modi's made a speech about doing more for telling your sons also where they're going out and checking their movement, as opposed to just getting, asking a daughter to stay home. And I hope that wasn't just talking points. I hope they mean something behind it. I haven't seen evidence of that, but that kind of like language, it just comes naturally to the mindset where, if you want to, if you hear something bad's happened, even the progressive people will sometimes say, then why was she out? As if that's the, and I don't necessarily fault that. I mean, of course, if you really do an analysis on it, it's very hurtful. But I understand that knee-jerk reaction. It's because we live in a very imperfect world, and it's a deeply patriarchal society. In my own extended and immediate family, we've had situations where husbands have beaten their wives, in my own family, right? So this is why people don't talk about it. No one wants to talk about this stuff. People feel embarrassed and ashamed. If my family members actually listen to this, they're probably not going to be happy I'm saying this. I understand that. These are not comfortable truths to discuss, and yet they deeply affect us. And it's coming out in my work now because I'm finding a way to process. I can be quiet about it like others, but I don't want to be. I'm not beating about it, like shouting about it from rooftop. This is my way of dealing with it. I'm also trying to shed light on it, but I'm also trying to heal my own pain. It's not fun to hear about your family, female family members who have been hurt. And the worst thing is it's tolerated. It's considered like a private, closed family matter. You're not supposed to interfere and talk about it. It's infuriating to me. And I'm never going to apologize for it. My dear sweet Dadima went through it, and I loved her, and I just hate that she went through it. And I wonder what her life would have been like if she had lived in this time. So I'm just saying, like, it's okay to, it's not okay to tolerate it, but if you do tolerate it, it will come out in other ways. These are traumatic things for people to even witness, or even hear about, even if you never witness it. I never witnessed it. I've heard about it, about a loved one or about friends, or it's just hurtful. And we have a lot of growing to do as a society. And I'm not just talking about like Desi people and South Asian culture. I mean, the same crap happens here in this country too. It happens all over the world because we live in a patriarchal world. It's not a country specific thing. So this kind of stuff makes me extremely angry, and I feel powerless to do anything about it. So in my own small way, I'm trying to, but I think as a people, as a society, we have so much work to do, and we are, I think, sometimes focusing on the wrong thing by, again, like I said, you know trying to contain the mobility of the women. Just it's just it comes from a place of concern. I understand that rationally, but it's not actually going to help.
You said a lot of things, right? So, and they're great things because I think that you are infuriated by all of these things that are normalized in the Indian culture, right? And then we can talk about our society in general. But I mean, talking about the breaking cycles, first of all, breaking cycles of parents saying, okay, putting all of these restrictions on our women in India. First of all, it's telling the men out there and telling the patriarchy that it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to rape our women. It's okay to molest them in buses. It's okay to jerk off right behind them. That's okay, because guess what? We'll put restrictions on our women, right? So how do we, the first question is, how do we as a community break that cycle of parents living in India? And I totally get it, right? I'm not a mother or any right now, but I totally understand where parents are coming from, right? But as a community, we need to break those cycles because it does affect mental health of women. It also scares them, right? Right? Like for me, for example, when you're telling me I have to come home by a certain time because there's crazies out there, I'm scared of crazies all day long. Right? Like I'm just like, okay, well, where are these crazy people? And I'm just paranoid all day long. So it really affects people's mental health regardless of the time of day, right? So you're starting instilling trauma at a very young age, for women. One thing I wanted to point out is that you said that there's a scale, right, of like sexual assault and teasing, right? And you're in the middle. And it's still hard for you, and it was still hard for you to even talk about it. So I want to know your advice of like, if you're on the furthest end of this scale, right? How should me and you create this community for women and men and families to talk about it if they're on the further end of the scale? And I know that it's going to be hard, but like, how do we work together to create this community? Because it's clearly very important for future generations and people who are going through this right now and who are probably listening to this and saying that this is happening to me and it's hurting both my mind, my body, and definitely my spirit. Like, how do we create this community for them to be comfortable enough to talk about it and to share what they're going through and to share their awareness to others?
I don't know if I have the answer to this, but I will say that not everyone needs to feel that it's their job or calling to solve this. But I do think that first, the individuals that have gone through this have to feel comfortable in acknowledging it. And it could be that they feel doing that with someone who's one degree of freedom away from them versus just a different organization or community out there. Sometimes it's completely the opposite, where it's easier to talk to someone you don't know about it than not. But knowing which resources are available is a starting place, I think. And again, I've never been on that end, so I'm just speculating. It's possible what I'm saying is not actually at all helpful. Uh, but I think of it more as long as I'm creating a space where it's okay to talk about things, no matter which where you are on the scale. It's not like scale dependent, right? And we've started that dialogue through the seal. In fact, they're really amazing women that have helped me make this film. A bulk of the team is actually women, which is something I'm very proud of. Really, like fantastic women for the most part, and then some amazing men as well that are part of the team. But we've had different discussions on this, and my hope is that once the film is done with the festival circuit in the near future, in the next few months, I can have a more informed rollout where it's not just that it's available to watch, but you can watch it and you can also have a dialogue about some of the themes. And not just a dialogue like an intellectual dialogue, but you can talk even about your personal experiences. That was my hope for it. I don't know if in the COVID world, hopefully it's still possible in a virtual setting, but that is one small way of doing it. But I know that there's much more like deeper and better established organizations that are already doing this work, where I think it's as long as there's enough outlets and people know how to reach them, it's really up to them to reach, and maybe to others to nudge people towards it or encourage people. But I don't know what else we can do beyond that. Yeah, those are some things that come to mind.
Thank you so much, Richa, for spending this time with me and talking to me about really, really deep subjects that are important to the Indian community and a lot of different communities out there. And I really do appreciate you responding to my email to say, hey, can you come to on this podcast? And you are such a beautiful soul, and you continue to be fearless in following your dreams and your passion. I wish you all the best. I will certainly market the seal and also Taza Kun a lot more before the seal comes out. So thank you so much, Richa. Thank you for watching or listening to episode 2 of Fearless Fresh Blood. My conversation with Richa today went really deep, and it added so much value to my thoughts and in my life. Her words made me think deeper into my own experiences and into my own being. And I realized that I am never alone. There's always going to be somebody who has gone through similar experiences as me. I hope you feel the same way after watching or listening to this week's episode of Fearless. Today, Richa's fearlessness has taught me so much. Here are just a few bullet points to keep in mind. Dream. Just dream. Find your people who you can share similar dreams with. Trust me, they're all out there, especially in our internet days of Google and Twitter and Instagram and all of the gajillion social media outlets out there. The dream starts with you. Don't box yourself up into some kind of label. We can never fit into a box, so why even try? Try something new, a passion project. Go out of your comfort zone. Start a podcast. It might be scary at first, but when you find a community who shares the similar passions and dreams as you and builds you up, it's not scary anymore. If anything, it's really thrilling. All you have to do is try and keep on trying. Healing from past traumas is so important, and I know it isn't easy. Richa taught us the benefits of writing as a form of healing for her. So let's go all find our forms of healing and just do it. Be kind to yourself. Take care of yourself. You owe it to yourself. Self-medicating and other types of coping mechanisms can only take us so far with our healing. We should all be aware of our realities and where our minds, our bodies, and our spirits go during different parts of our day. We should super understand what is happening in our being. Be more introspective and open-minded. And one thing that really tugged on my heart of what Richa taught us today is that as a society, we need to stop putting restrictions on our women and change the behaviors of our men toward our women. We need to start having these discussions and growing together as a community instead of repressing our emotions and repressing our thoughts and intellect. We cannot scare our women back into their traumatized bodies and minds, which really affect their spirit and their ability to live soulfully or even love soulfully. And lastly, on a lighter note, watch the first brown vampire in Richa's film Taza Kun Fresh Blood, and check out The Seal when it comes out. Trust me, you will not be disappointed. These short films are so rich in human behavior and tell a beautiful and soulful story. As a reminder, every week I have worked super hard on creating writing prompts and resources to help you write your story and understand it. They're all available on my webpage, www.kfrancescacoelho.com. Please know you are never alone. You will always have a community of people who share similar experiences as you. And if anything, you always have me. I invite you to join my community, a community of healing and resilience that I created for my own healing. Please join me. Together we can do big things, including changing the world. Thank you for listening, and even thank you for watching.